Root Mobile presents Root Amplify in association with CNBC TV 18.
The rise of mobile devices has really transformed how we interact with this world. Digital identity holds the potential to reshape authentication, offering convenience and security both. But as our smartphones become an extension of who we are, protecting and leveraging this mobile-based authentication becomes very crucial. Yet, with increased digitization and online transactions, frauds have surged, and we were just hearing about that as well. Now, to combat this robust fraud, detection using mobile intelligence and advanced tech is very vital today. Mobile intelligence, driven by data insights, AI, machine learning, it empowers organizations to gain insights from mobile devices. By utilizing signals from these devices, businesses are able to enhance user experience, strengthen security, and make more informed choices. Mobile intelligence also fuels innovation across industries. So in this session, our panelists who are here with us are going to delve into how these three aspects, which is digital identity, fraud detection, and mobile intelligence, intersect, discussing challenges and opportunities. A very warm welcome to all of you again, and thank you for your time here on this panel. Let me start with one of the telecom providers here, Ali, from Reliance Jio, because we just heard Mr. Vaidyanathan talk about, the scare among customers. You click on a link, you get an OTP, you give them some information, and wham, money's gone. Just give us some insights into what sort of technologies are shaping up to help mobile companies like you prevent these kind of frauds from happening.
See, one of the things that Milind also mentioned in his inaugural speech is that even when we ask people to switch off their mobile phones, they are still fiddling with those mobile phones. So mobile phones have really become an extension of ourselves. And telcos have specific data points which can be provided, which will help enterprises authenticate users or authenticate transactions, and in the process help to sort of curb fraud. So those points are available. Now, how the enterprises build the logic and the intelligence to work on those data points is something that the enterprises will have to work. Right now, this space is relatively nascent for us. It's not really picked up, but we see a lot of traction there. We are seeing a lot of international and Indian partners now talk about MI, talk about a lot of use cases, and we believe there's a lot of opportunity there as well.
Okay, we'll get back to more on that, but Alec, let me come to you. In this increasingly digitized world that we're living in today, how do you see digital identity itself evolving, and how do you balance the needs, on one hand, using this data, but also protecting the privacy of customers?
Thanks, Ritu. I agree with Ali and Milind. We have 11 billion mobile phones mobile numbers which are active globally. So that's a huge number. And these SIMs are typically in mobile devices for the most part, and you also have some IoT devices that are logged in. Some very pressing challenges of today: you get an OTP, someone takes over your account, and your money is gone, right? If you look at the typical user journey as a digital user, you have 3 stages. Your onboarding journey before you come onto an app, then you transact within an app, you buy a service, you sell a service, and then your journey post that. It could be customer service, again within the app, or it could be a journey outside of the app. You're probably waiting for your order and so on. There are a lot of challenges along all of these journeys. One thing that the entire industry has realized is that mobile numbers are here to stay. Mobile numbers are ubiquitous, so why not use it? And again, if you look at most of the digital platforms today, all the IAM platforms, the identity and access management platforms, are password dependent. So you can just about imagine how difficult it is to navigate from one app to the other, or one platform, if you are expected to remember a username and a password. So all of this kind of fits. You have the mobile number, which is kind of acknowledged globally as the unique identifier for a digital user. Once you come onto this platform, right, once you log in, there are a lot of threats. how do you mitigate if someone's trying to impersonate you? How does the platform understand, okay, is it really Aleek or is it Ali who's trying to log in as Aleek? So, and again, there are OTP leaks, money gets siphoned off. So herein we see identity evolving by addressing these issues with secure network-based authentication methods, where we can actually confirm details, minute details like, is the SIM actually on the same device of the user? Has the SIM swapped? Any change in user behavior? Is the user in a location that is not what he's representing on the platform, and so on, right? So these are how we see digital identity trends evolving on the login side. On the transaction side, like when you're within the app, this is where most of the fraud happens. You're trying to buy something or you're trying to send money to someone. It's very easy for a scamster to call you, and we've seen these in the news, right? People call you, convince you, I'm from this bank. Why don't you urgently try to transfer money? Your account is going to get blocked. So we see those solutions advancing as well with the power of mobile and with the power of IP addresses. Using a combination of both, we can understand the trustworthiness of the user. We can understand his behavior, and we can kind of tell the brand or the enterprise and help him understand or take an informed decision on the transaction.
Okay, Ritesh, as a fintech, I'm sure at BharatPe, you must come across a lot of these fraudsters, right? And they're getting more sophisticated by the day. We just heard how they can use ChatGPT to improve the grammar in their text, or use deep fakes to make you believe that you're talking to your friends. What are some of these emerging technologies that you're using to combat these frauds on a daily basis?
Yeah, being a lending company, we come across these fraudsters on a daily basis. Apart from the regular transaction monitoring system that we had, which was traditional and tells us that there's an anomaly in the pattern that we see, but that was manual. That was based on hard checks. Now, as we are moving towards the AI era, there are pattern recognition algorithms. So we move toward data science. We have a lot more information, which tells you that, okay, this is an anomaly which may not be seen by the traditional AML softwares which are out in the market. And apart from that, right from the data that we have, there's like data that is available to you directly, and there's inferred data, inferred insights on the top of it, which help us to detect fraud. As we are moving ahead, and it's an iterative process. As we are moving ahead, we see like these scamsters are like becoming smart as well, as we discussed before. So we have to catch up with them and have more inferred information on the top of the regular information that we have to tackle these cases.
You have to keep one step ahead of these fraudsters, but like you said, ever evolving. Let me ask the banker as well. Samir, these regulatory frameworks and compliance requirements, they also play a critical role in digital identity when we talk about intelligence for mobile. How do you ensure adherence to these kind of regulations while also trying to keep up with the emerging tech, while keeping up with changing regulations, and ensuring you're able to deliver a seamless experience to the user, all of it in one go?
Right. Well, let me take a step back. Look, today the adoption of mobile banking. In last year, the UPI transactions, for example, in 2022 crossed $74 billion, right? In June this year itself, I think the transactions crossed, if I'm not wrong, almost 15 to 16 trillion, just a couple of months back. So I think mobile is the way forward, okay? And the penetration will be huge in the next few years. Probably by this year end, we would have more than 120 or 115 trillion UPI transactions happening through mobile being the primary channel. So mobile is here to stay. The penetration will increase, as I said. But so that's the point number one. Second point, it is also important that as we are onboarding semi-urban and rural people, more specifically, onto the folds of the mobile banking, the fraudsters on the other side are there to take advantage of this, okay? And one of the examples given Mr. 𝗙𝗢𝗟𝗟𝗢𝗪 was, a typical social engineering attack whereby fraudsters are calling you using your WhatsApp DPs or using a call as if he's your boss or somebody knows you very clearly and very closely. So I think these social engineering tactics will also emerge, rather they are emerging as the digital transformation or digital adoption is growing. So the Reserve Bank of India in our case had to sort of intervene, right, and bring about the regulations. In fact, the regulation is so fantastic and so progressive that it has helped us in reaching a level in the mobile application or mobile payment security. Okay?
So regulatory compliance is not a challenge at all?
Absolutely not. That's what I'm saying. It is absolutely not a challenge, because if you see, the RBI on one hand, they are in fact helping you out in putting the right security or risk management principles. Okay? You get budgets because it's a regulatory mandate. That's a point. Second important point is RBI or regulator for that matter doesn't become an inhibitor or a prohibitor in taking up the innovations. RBI themselves have set up a sandboxing lab where if the interesting companies, they come, they participated, and they showcase your digital and the cyber security stories, and it becomes an example for all of us to adopt, because already the solution has undergone a lot of testing and use cases, so it's relatively easy for us to adopt. So I think regulators largely have helped us. On one side, there is a regulatory requirements, but on the other side, there is ample scope for innovation and implementing the best-in-breed security practices. Last point, what is important in addition to or between these two is the fact that how do you strike a balance of security, the risk management, at the same time the digital trust by the consumer. So that balancing game is something people need to adopt, the CISOs need to adopt. One of the right example given by Aliak was, and there are various solutions probably, and we will touch little later. But yes, it's a balancing act.
All right, Yashraj, you've been waiting by patiently. Let me quickly bring you in as well. These three large themes that we're talking about, the digital identity, fraud detection, and mobile intelligence. The intersection of these has implications not just for the mobile or for the banking industry, for across industries. Any use cases, any success stories you can share with us as to how that's been used to counter some of these challenges and where they could be implemented?
Yeah, surely. Very happy to do that, and it was great listening to the thoughts shared by my fellow panelists. What you very rightly said, that digital identity, digital footprints, as well as any sort of activity done by customers on any digital media, I feel is all now linked to the identity of a customer. And when I mean identity, it is not just something that you use for authentication or getting access or not getting access to something. I think it is very well used to curate the entire experience of you availing that financial service. Like for example, for us, right, we have our bread and butter as a business for the last 7 years as a systemically important NBFC has been to actually do financial inclusion by virtue of processing and accessing data sets, obviously with customer consent, which makes it, and the current digital lending guidelines by the RBI, as well as your digital data protection bill, which was tabled a couple of days back, makes it a lot more pertinent. But coming back, accessing data sets across the spectrum of user behavior, coming from smartphone metadata, coming from transactional data, coming from banking data, coming from demographic inputs, and combining that to actually create a 360-degree view of who the customer actually is, right? And then using that at scale to underwrite financial services to the customer. And these customers, again, are folks who would have never imagined getting access to these services, starting with credit, right? So that is what we believe is the actual ground level impact of what digital revolution, or what the fastest rates of smartphone penetration, the fastest rates of internet penetration, and the lowest rates of data can do for you. It can transform a population by making it access services that it could never do it. These customers that I'm speaking about earlier in tier 3, tier 4 areas were accessing these same services, for example, credit again, at usurious rates of interest by loan sharks who are now actually able to access credit with financial institutions like us, right? Same thing then goes for curating the experience better. Same guys, when you have built a customer history with them, tomorrow you know that, okay, these guys, say, living in a back of the beyond village in Chhattisgarh, are running a kirana shop, for example, then you can go one step further, evaluate what are the intricacies of that kirana shop that they run and underwrite them for a larger amount of credit because you've already seen their behavior over time. And all of this happening digitally, all of this happening largely without having any foot on the ground. And this is really what I feel are the largest use cases of what we have seen in terms of combining data at scale with combining ML models, which are fine-tuned to operate at this scale for these particular use cases across credit and also now insurance and to a large extent investments as well.
Well, no doubt, the Jam Trinity, India Stack, all of that data is helping us reach credit, get credit to the unbanked. No doubt about that, but let's talk about OLX as well. This is a different perspective. If you could give us, with the help of an example, how do you strike a balance between ensuring there is robust security measure and the user experience on the app is not compromised? I mean, all of us who've used OLX, I'm sure at some point have got a message saying, you know, I'm going to make an offer for and so, but your system then alerts it could be a suspicious user. So, you know, just give us an example of how you're able to strike a balance and what your sense has been.
Okay, so you have raised a very important topic. Why customer experience is becoming so much of importance? Because if you look at, you know, the macro economic situation, the growth at any cost is not the option anymore. Hence, the brands need to come back to their existing customers, existing user base, and get more LTV generated out of, you know, the existing base. And that can happen only if you give great experience to that user base. Now, on the other hand, because to give that great experience, you need data to generate insights, to forge those deeper connections. You know, we heard in the previous session, you know, to what level you can personalize, you know, the communication. Exactly. So you need data for that. However, when it comes to data, there are two things which are happening. One, next year, your third-party cookies are going away from Chrome. In fact, if I'm not wrong, 1% rollout has already happened. It means you need to come back to your first-party data. Earlier this week, Lok Sabha passed the data protection bill. It means the way we are storing data, processing data, we need to change that way. We need to tell the user how we are going to store your data, give user option, you know, to take the consent, and whenever user want to opt out, we need to give that option as well. And that reminds me, you know, there was one Bollywood movie, Gangs of Wasseypur,
Yes.
and there was this scene where hero puts hand, you know, over the heroine's hand, and heroine said, "Permission leni chahiye," right? And give option so that I can opt out as well. Today, if you fill a lead online to any platform, say for loan or something or insurance, you will start getting so many calls. I gave my consent for that specific lead.
Yeah.
And when I say don't call me anymore, next day I will receive 20 other calls. So we need to give user that option so that I can opt out. So I think that is the balance we need to create. On one hand, yes, we want to give great experience. We want to improve our LTV. But on the other hand, we need to give the user controls as well. So whenever I want, I can take your service, I give my consent. On the other hand, I don't want other services, or I don't want you to call me X number of times.
Yeah, you know, I'm very tempted to ask Sameer here because I'm sure most of the audience in this room would have gotten calls about taking some loan, taking some credit card, some or the other service, I don't know what else. Just your quick thoughts on the same, this opt-in, opt-out. How do you deal with this data consent and what you make of the new bill now that's coming up?
Yes, I think data privacy is extremely important, and anyway it's going to be a mandatory regulatory requirement, right? So it will definitely enhance, as I said, the digital trust. When I know that the data, my data is going to be safe, it is not going to get disclosed to third party without my consent, I think that will definitely enhance the trust of a consumer on the specific organizations or across the financial ecosystem. So it's, from that point of view, it's extremely important. The second point about, the frauds, I think the frauds, especially the social engineering frauds like phishing, wishing, the voice-based calls are going to rise, are going to get there. In fact, the interesting thing is today, even though right, the people forget about the hacking or the infiltration or compromise of your mobile devices. The hackers have reached to a stage whereby they are calling the gullible people and they are forcing them or luring them to carry out transactions. A guy like a digital hypnotized, and he is carrying out transactions on his own, on his mobile set, and the fraudster is absolutely watching remotely. I mean, the sophistication of cyber attacks have reached to that level, right? So I think continuous awareness is, so we call in our parlance called people, processes, and technology. So the people aspect, the awareness aspect is a continuous stuff. It has to be not done by one entity, but the complete ecosystem need to give a lot of focus on the user awareness, employee awareness about this emerging fraud. Now, of course, there are interesting solutions have come up. They were there in the past. Now, of course, a lot of innovations have happened. One of the points touched by Alec was sort of a behavioral, biometric and behavioral thinking, whereby you will check the behavior of a consumer, how easily he's clicking the mobile buttons, right? How he has hold the mobile phone. Is it like very straight or is it like different? So those gyroscopic algorithms, they are available now. The interesting innovative companies have come up, to curb the frauds. The transaction monitoring systems have also come up. So I'm pretty optimistic in terms of this complete space, saying that we should be able to manage the frauds, but the silver bullet is going to be only the user awareness.
Well, let me step away from frauds a little bit, because data can be used for a whole lot of good as well, right? Yash was talking an example of how you're able to lend to the last mile. So Ali, let me ask you, how are you using this barrage of data that you're getting from mobile intelligence? Are you able to translate it into some actionable insights, that you're able to use positively?
So you're right, Ritu. See, one of the points that you mentioned when you were posing your question to our colleague is that while we talk about security layers being imposed, the user experience should not be hampered. I mean, that's the key. In the quest of getting the fraudster out, if you keep the even genuine user out, if he has a tough time getting in, then you have a problem. So somewhere the balance has to be drawn between security and user experience. Now, some of the use cases that we are talking about in the industry, or one of the use cases that we've already started, is on authentication, on silent authentication. And, Alec mentioned about OTP. Now, OTP theft is a big issue today, right? I mean, that is one of the ways of the fraudster. If I have access to your OTP, I can probably get into your account and I can do those transactions. So in this, what happens is that once the user enters his mobile number and he submits, the API query will flow into my system and we will validate the IP with the mobile number. And once that is validated, we will give you access to the app. So one, there is no OTP, so there is no question of OTP theft, right? I mean, the device also needs to be with you. So that sort of, helps you.
Could you help us understand this with an example, for instance? If I have to make a transaction without using an OTP?
If you want to do any transaction today, or if you are logging into an application, after you've given your password, user ID, password and all that, you will need an OTP that comes to you. If I have access to your OTP, then I can also access, right? In the case of SMV, or in the case of silent mobile verification that we call it, this particular issue is resolved. Plus, the user experience is extremely smooth, because I don't have to go back and forth looking at the OTP, trying to punch in, maybe I don't get it right the first time. So that also is sort of, the user experience is maintained. At the same time, it's secured. Okay. So there is no OTP theft that is possible here. It has, obviously, it has some, some things that need work. For example, it needs your mobile data to be enabled for the system to validate. Otherwise, it will send you a negative return. But most of the customers who are now transacting are on mobile data anyways. So, so we are able to use those cases, and we are seeing good traction coming there. We are seeing a lot of very large enterprises talk to us on this. A few regulators are also talking to us on how we can do away with OTP at some stage and look at only the SMB bit. So those discussions are on. I think, as we keep interacting in these forums with the enterprises, we'll understand what relevant data points they can, actually use. Yep.
Alec, if you could take this forward, the silent authentication is a new thing that we've heard today, but any other such emerging practices, technologies to counter the rising frauds?
Yes. So, just expanding on what Ali mentioned, phishing is the term. Phishing happens when there's something to phish. You actually enter something, and a fraudster gets control of it, and then he can access your account. In the case of silent auth, the beauty is that there's nothing to enter. And because there's nothing to enter, there's nothing to phish, right? So keeping in line with the user experience, it's very seamless. This, coupled with some mobile intelligence signals, actually tries to ring-fence the entire fraudulent scenario. And I'll kind of explain it. So, for example, if you look at maybe Ashraj or Ritesh lending, BNPL, they have done a fantastic job in making the entire experience seamless. And you can check out, maybe buy your order on Swiggy and pay later, right? Or Urban Company and pay later, right? These are examples. At the end of the month, you get a bill. The challenge that they face is, how do I know a user who's coming onto my platform is genuine? I may give him the best authentication method, again, in line with the best experience, sign up quickly, no OTP, come in, check out, buy a huge order, and then maybe run away, right? Not pay. So we combine this with a lot of intelligence attributes, as we call it, which is a combination of mobile and IP traits. So on the mobile side, they would be genuinely interested to know, is this number a genuine number or not? Is it a VoIP number? Is it a temporary number just activated? He's come in, used services for a month, and then there's no trace. He's taken a loan and there's no trace, right? Is this number active? Does he regularly transact? Does he communicate? In terms of his IP, he says he's in Mumbai, but what's his actual location, right? Is he using an IP address that's already blacklisted? Is he logging into maybe a Cashy or a BharatPe through a VPN, right? So, and is it a free VPN? So these are the things that come together. And all of these, when put together through an algorithm, right, they bring in beautiful insights, yet keeping the experience seamless and frictionless.
Puneet, would you like to take that forward?
Okay, so three things I'll mention here. One is, like I was earlier mentioning about the consent, and if I mix both, consent and digital identity, I would say consented digital identity is going to be the currency of the future. Second is, when we talk about frauds, if we talk about ad frauds alone, it is more than $100 billion industry. It is funding wars. It is so big.
Did you say ad frauds is $100
Yes.
billion?
More than 100 billion. As per some estimate, it is even $120 billion. So it is more than 100 billion industry. What kind of traffic you are, getting, what kind of app downloads you are getting, engagement you are getting, somewhere 5 to up to 20% could be fraud. You might be paying for fraud, and this fraud is happening across all the sources, wherever you are running your marketing, to different levels. So I would suggest the first thing to do is maybe have a POC. Sometimes we live in optimism bias, that whatever bad is happening in the world would not happen to me. Leave that optimism bias aside, have a POC. There are a lot of players in the market who can do free POC for you, and you will realize how much of fraud is happening on the ad side alone. And I'm not talking about the phishing and mobile calling and SMS, purely ad fraud. So please do that, have a POC.
Well, Yasharaj, if I could take this forward with you as well. All of us are using smartphones on a daily basis. We may or may not be taking loans on it, but I'm sure a large part of your customer base is. What are the pitfalls of only heavily relying on smartphones, to sort of get your loans or all of these digital activities? What have you come across?
No, I think that the two parts to this question for as an organization, the fact that most of the consumers that we are interacting with are on smartphones and smartphone-heavy traffic is what we largely get is a boon for us because it allows us to access data sets that then allows us to then consequently underwrite these financial services that we want to give to the customers. Web-based data or native web data is generally very thin in terms of what you can actually use to, what alternate you can use to kind of give these services. And hence as I said, like fast internet penetration, fast smartphone penetration has really helped us from that angle. Secondly, obviously, because of events like COVID, it forced a large segment of population that was traditionally shy of accessing things like financial services online because came online because the simple act of walking to your nearest bank branch and doing the same transactions was far more difficult at that point of time, right? So then it brought onus on players like us to make sure that we are creating the relevant experiences that enforce trust in customers and allows them to access these services. But there's a flip side of which is on the consumer side, that our consumers increasingly okay with accessing services online. And we have seen that there's a decline in trust that has happened. And I honestly believe that the fundamental currency of accessing any kind of financial transactions online is not money, but it is fundamentally trust. And the biggest custodian of trust in India have traditionally been the banks because people do trust them with almost anything and everything. And then it is important for us to then ensure that at every single customer level transaction, we are bringing out the element of trust that how is the data being secured, how is money moving, how are we vaulting your PII in a way so that people know that this is what is actually going on behind the scenes in whatever way possible. Otherwise, it becomes tricky to go from like the scale that we are at to going 2x of that. And I think the regulator has done a fantastic job there when weeding out a lot of unscrupulous players. It has done a fantastic job in defining what is right and what is wrong and how data needs to be accessed and stored. And then it allows customers to then access these platforms with a lot more ease.
Well, trust is what we're all living on. But let me ask you as well, at BharatPe, what do you make of it? Heavily relying on mobile-based technology, on smartphones and mobiles alone, to sort of give this push on digital lending, for instance, in the case of BharatPe. What are the pitfalls?
Yeah, so there's a pre-world before DLG and the post-world DLG. DLG is digital lending guidelines, which came that tells us actually that you have to follow these regulations while you are digitally lending, right? One example would be, everyone was doing it, so I'll give you an example. It happened to me like 5 years, 6 years back. I took a loan from a bank, won't name, and I missed a EMI because I was traveling, and I got a call to all my team members that, okay, Ritesh took a loan and he's not paying it back, right? Can you ask him to pay him back, pay the EMI? So things like that. So there's data that we own as a company, that all the app activity that you do on my app, I own it. But then there's data that it's yours, but you don't know. And the DLG actually tells us that, okay, this is theirs data and you can't store it. That's like contacts.
I think that's something RBI has made amply clear in the latest circular. You cannot access the customer's contact.
You can't store contacts, you can't call, but at the same time that you have to do recovery, right? There are bad loans. And you have to recover those loans, and that's where the digital identity comes in, where you infer those points and do your underwriting better that, okay, the person on the other side of the app is actually a person who is A, affluent, B, willing to give the loan back, and is a genuine person, right? And that will come with the data that you own, and not with the data they own, the consumer. You can't touch it. You can't touch it anymore. We're going to be more stringent, and we have to rely on digital identity and inferred information to do better underwriting, collection, or make products.
All right. Before I move on to... Puneet, go on.
Add one thing here. So, taking a leap from the previous point I made, when you submit a lead to one platform, suddenly you start receiving calls from multiple platforms. Why is it happening? Sometimes the source of leakage is in the organization. Hence, the organization need to take one step of anonymization of data. No one should be able to see the personal information of your customer in the organization. Second thing, when it comes to processing the data or analyzing the data, use aggregation. No one should be able to see individual, customers' data and have analysis on individual line item. Have anonymization and aggregation. I think these are the starting steps when we talk about data security and safety of
So protect customer data within the organization as well. Sameer, what would you say are some of the challenges you come across when you're trying to implement these initiatives on data security, on mobile intelligence, on data identity?
The challenges are from the customer perspective or from internally?
From the bank's perspective.
No, challenges are, see, when anything, you need to take it up as part of risk mitigation, right? It requires, collaborations and buy-in from all the relevant players. Relevant players first, that is the first step, I would say. Not a challenge in that sense. But the important point, which I believe is, before rolling out the solutions, I think it's very important to sort of develop the scenarios and do a little bit of POC or a simulation to find out how the customer's behavior would be, right? Because I think Ali was rightly mentioning, just for the sake of implementing a security solution, you should not end up creating, an additional layer which could become a hindrance to the customer's safety or security, customer convenience largely, right? That is a challenge which needs to be addressed before rolling out of any solutions. Internally, I don't think so. Like any other organizations, there will be various challenges, right, from the people to skill sets to sometimes the budgetary restrictions, sometimes the turnaround time getting breached, etc. But that's a part of any important project. The larger challenge, as I said, is making sure that the trust by a consumer, by a customer, and the regulator as well gets enhanced when you roll out the solutions. Then that is a success. It's like security is enabling the business to increase the balance sheet, right? Rather than becoming a facilitator or sort of the afterthought, right? That's what.
All right, we're running out of time. So quickly, one final question to you, Ali. What in your mind is one of the most exciting potential for mobile intelligence to come in the next few years, you think?
See, one of the use cases that almost all the partners are talking to us is on SIM swap, which Alec also mentioned. The way this works is that whenever if somebody has swapped your SIM, he can do a transaction on your behalf, and he can fraudulently take away money. In this case, we can provide a data point saying that this SIM has been swapped in the last 24 hours, 48 hours, whatever. The enterprise wants to check. And this is very crucial because before you give him the OTP or before you give him the SMB connect, if you do a SIM swap, now how enterprises want to leverage that is something which they will have to figure out. I mean, whether you want to validate all transactions or you want to validate specific value transactions, or if you know that this user is, the use case or whatever transaction is not as per the user pattern, then you may want to validate through a SIM swap. And once you know that the SIM has not been swapped, chances are that he's a genuine customer, okay? Because most frauds, they happen because of a SIM swap. Somebody has swapped your SIM and he's got access to your OTP, so he's able to do these transactions. So even when the transaction is happening, if an internet banking transaction is happening, before you give him the OTP, if you check the SIM swap status, that will give you at least a sort of comfort that this is the same genuine user, and maybe then you can pass on the OTP to them. And similarly, if you look at a few more use cases that we keep hearing about, one is age on network, for example, where you can identify if the user has been on a particular mobile network for the last 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever, right? If you're giving a sort of unsecured loan to somebody, it's a small loan, a very elaborate process for checks may be difficult, may be very expensive as well. But we all know for a fact if somebody has thought of doing a fraud initially itself when he's taking a small loan, then chances are he will not use the number that he's been using for the last 10 years or 5 years. So if you do an age on network check, that will give you one more kind of comfort, saying that this person has been using this phone number for the last 5 years. So obviously, if he's disclosing that to me, the chances are he's a genuine guy. So, some of these use cases are pretty brilliant. And, if we can use them properly or all of them together as well, they can really add on.
Sounds to me like all of you have a mini CBI running inside your organizations with the level of checks that you're doing. But thank you, gentlemen. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Alec, Puneet, Ritesh, Samir, Ali, and Yasharaj. It's been a pleasure speaking with all of you, and thank you for being a wonderful audience. Thank you.
Thank you.